don't solve their problems. So they're going to come in with their problems. Your job is not to solve them, but your job is to teach them how to go through a problem solving process and to let them know that you believe in them. That's empowering, right?
Mhm.
Solving their problem is micromanaging. It robs them of their power.
Lisa Foster, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, John Mark.
I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So we met probably 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Does that sound
Sounds
right?
right. Yeah.
And what we're so excited to talk about today is not only your background, but what you're doing now with leadership development, emotional quotient training, and just so much to unpack on that front. But you have this unique position of being an academic who's also taught, who's also been a social entrepreneur before it was cool to be a social entrepreneur, right? And this is one of the things that I love so much. Can we talk about your business that you started and scaled before we dive into everything else?
Sure. Sure. You want me just to just give people a little background?
Yeah, give a little background. People are going to
Okay.
recognize it once you start talking about this because you set
Okay.
a trend. Just give us the years, the timeline, and then we'll talk about what the product was as well.
Okay. So the year I started was 2005. I was a high school English teacher, and I went to Australia on a trip. My husband had a project there, and I found reusable bags, and it seemed like such an obvious thing that we should all be doing.
Hmm.
And I came back to the United States and I told all my friends, hey, we have to go reusable. We have to use these bags. And one of my friends eventually just turned to me and said, no, Lisa, we don't have to do anything. You are obsessed. You have to do something. And I took up that challenge and I started a company to sell reusable bags. I did not want to do a nonprofit. This is germane to this audience here today.
Right.
I decided not to do a nonprofit, first of all, because there was a product that I could sell.
Mhm.
And I thought I would sell the product to fund my spread of this message that it's so important to go reusable rather than just throwing things away and the damage that single use plastics in particular have
Right.
on our environment and that impact. And I thought, well, I'd rather sell a product because I'm not very good at fundraising and I don't like asking people for money. But turns out I was pretty good at sales. So my first year, I still was teaching. So I stood out on the staircase overlooking the faculty parking lot in my fourth period break, and I sold 250,000 bags. And I thought, well, I better stop teaching and give this a real shot. So my second year, I sold 2 million bags. And my third year, I sold 8 million reusable grocery bags across the United States. I had established major contracts. I was running a very big supply chain. I was running a much bigger company than I ever expected to be running. But I established myself as a top supplier of this item for the next 12 years.
Mm.
And I just hung on to that space. I was never the top because if you're selling the most bags, you're not making that much money because the really big, the Krogers and things and Walmarts will just push you down to where you're almost not making anything. So
Mhm.
I tried to pick off this slice of people who would pay a little bit more for good quality and good ethics. And I really nailed down the ethics in my company. No child labor. There was everybody on my supply chain got fed. And I used to say, no one here is getting fat, but everybody eats.
Right.
And I was really insistent from the people who make the thread that sews the seams, right, all the way to the trucker who delivers it to the door of the business. Everybody gets a bite, but nobody gets fat. So I really took care of the ethics and the quality. I worked very hard to
Mm.
maintain quality in China, which is not always hard to do. They always want to cut corners. And you're like, no, 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 we're not going to cheaper fabric. No, 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 we're not going to cheaper thread. No, 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 we're going to upgrade that little bottom stiffener because the black ones are just so bad. Like, let's just upgrade it.
I love it.
And so we just worked on ethics and quality and picked off that slice of the market that was willing to pay a couple of cents more for that. And that
Right.
was a really winning combination for the company. And eventually I was able to sell it. I did it for 12 years. And eventually I was able to sell it, and I completed um, the whole entrepreneur cycle. And I sometimes I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I didn't really mean to do what I meant to do, but
Right.
it was what I wanted to do. And it was really incredible, and I learned so much. So one of the things, we all know the numbers on startups. 9 out of 10 startups fail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think back, at the end, as I was sitting there looking back on it, and I had sold the company, I thought, why did I succeed when so many others don't? And it really did come down to how I treat people
Mm-hmm.
and emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I launched as a coach, that's really where I wanted to focus, is helping people really understand, who are they talking to?
Right.
Um, how are they treating their people? How are they treating their vendors? How are they treating their employees? How are they treating everybody, even the people who are not really your direct employees, but your vendors,
Right.
right? And the people down their supply chain. Um, and that's really been a focus of mine, how people treat other people. And it's a very powerful way to approach work, and particularly nonprofit work, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just think it's important for people to understand the trajectory, because you have a wonderful family. You have a PhD. You were teaching high school English, right? So already that's fascinating, right? There's a lot of fascinating things going on there.
And I was very happy as a high school English teacher. I love books. I love reading. I love talking about books. I thought it was like, this is the greatest job in the world. I get paid to talk about books. Like, honest. Like, that's, home run as far as I thought.
Absolutely. And it's just, you would be like the best high school English teacher too. That's awesome. Just like so fun, empathic, and driven. But then you stumble into this crazy opportunity, right? You find this huge trend at launch. And you're talking about 5x growth in your first year. I mean, it's insane, right? Going from
Oh, yeah.
250,000, I mean, just insane. Well, we're talking, no, that math is off. It's 8x growth. It's crazy,
Yeah.
crazy growth
8x
from
growth.
year one
And
to two.
then, 4x growth on top of that. And then, 2x growth on top of that. I mean, really exponential. Yeah,
Crazy. And
it was crazy.
it's wild, but you also did it with discipline and integrity. And you ask yourself, why did this work? Right? Why did this work? And
Yeah.
you have a PhD, you didn't go to Stanford, business school, you didn't go to Harvard, and you're like, okay, it worked because you understand people really well and you
And
care
actually,
about
like,
people.
that's kind of to the point. Like, I do say, with pride, my PhD is in English. It's not like an MBA, right? It's not like, but really, if you think about it, a degree in English is a degree in people. We sit around in classrooms and we talk about, well, why can't Hamlet just kill the man who killed his father? He's supposed to just kill him. Like, he murdered his father. Just have revenge. And this is like the revenge play gone wrong. You start to think, well, Hamlet went to school and he's had the Renaissance, and now he's, he really sees him as an individual, and
Mm,
he doesn't want to, all of his moral. And so when you really sit there and you spend years, really digging into
right.
characters, and then, you're in the business world and you start looking at people like characters and thinking, well, why won't this employee do that? It's the
Mm,
same question as
right.
what we ask of Hamlet, right? We have to have the same kind of investigation. So I really think that a lot of my English skills were really useful to me. It was a degree in emotional intelligence, actually.
Mm, hmm. I've heard many a leadership expert talk about Shakespeare specifically, as if you want to understand human behavior, read Shakespeare, right?
100%.
Right. Fascinating. We could probably spend too much time down there, but we won't. We'll go elsewhere. And so obviously our audience is a lot of social entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, people who are mission driven. They want to make a difference. And as a coach, right, you sold one bag at a time. And you
Mm-hmm.
said, I love this EQ side, the emotional intelligence, the emotional quotient. You went and got more training, right? More
Yeah.
certifications. You spent a lot of time and energy, resources doing that so that you can help more people. And you've worked with people in many different sectors, the tech sector, biotech specifically, work with a lot of NGOs and nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
And you built a list of very common pitfalls that you see specifically in the social sector when it comes to challenges that leaders face? I'd love to talk about those.
Okay.
Let's
Well,
start with
let's
this
talk
first one.
about it.
This idea of when we find ourselves prioritizing the mission over the people who help us accomplish the mission. What would you want to say about that?
Well, um, I would say that this is something that is fairly unique to the nonprofit space. I'm not going to say there aren't people in the for profit, but you see, it's more common in
Mm,
nonprofits where you get somebody who is so driven by the mission, they just seem to be blind to how they are affecting the people around them.
mhm.
And often, sometimes intentionally, but usually inadvertently, they end up offending a lot of people, and they just don't know why, because they're just trying to do something that is an unquestioned good. um, and really, I think that you can't increase your impact unless you are working really well with people. You have to
Right.
work with people. I worked with one nonprofit where somebody said, well, we speak for the trees. And I said, well, that is great, but you don't speak to the trees. You can't go to a piece of land and say, hey, straighten yourself up, you're a mess. You have to work with people to clean up that land and protect
Mm,
the land and make it pristine and make it function as an ecosystem. That is what people do. And so you're really going to have to work with people to get that done. And it's really important. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So when we think about some of these common pitfalls, like nonprofits are under a lot of stress. They face different types of constraints. Now, everyone faces challenges and stressful situations. But when you have to raise money from people who do not receive the services that you provide and then provide services elsewhere, it's easy for there to be like a missional mismatch. We want to call it that. What would you say, though, for someone who's feeling caught between a rock and a hard place? How do I prioritize my people with not over the mission, but maybe with the mission? We put
Yeah.
those two things together for alignment.
I think it really comes from within. I think this is very, very individual. And this is my experience working with people in nonprofits who are having a trouble with other people and just trying to get the mission done and seem to be stymied because they can't get it done.
Mm,
They're having a hard time with people. I find that it's really individual. So this is why I use individualized coaching and we use an emotional intelligence assessment.
right,
So people may not know, but we have been measuring emotional intelligence for over 50 years. We've got tons of data
right,
and we know exactly how to do this, and it's really effective. So, for some people, it can be a lack of self confidence. They're
right.
not confident in how they're treating people. They are more confident in, just going into a pure situational, thinking about trees or whatever it is. Um, and some people are just haven't developed interpersonal relationships. They have confidence, but they just haven't developed that skill. That's a skill we can measure. Even empathy. I had a client um, not long ago who, you know, when I measured her what showed up was a lack of impulse control.
Mm,
And I just said, "Tell me about that." And she goes, "Well, in my family, if you don't say what you think, you're being fake." And I said, "I respect that." And we really talked about how to be authentic, but also tactful.
mm,
There's a way and a place to say everything.
right,
You
right.
just have to think about what is the best way and be a little more strategic. She was a senior scientific officer. She was about to get fired when I started working with her. Um, and that was 5 years ago. And now I haven't, I worked with her a couple of years ago, and I haven't really, she just took the year or year and a half that we worked together, and she is now poised to be the next leader of this organization. She is
Fantastic.
beloved by everybody, trusted by everybody. She's made an incredible network of people who really believe in her and the mission of this place. So she's done an incredible job of overcoming what was in her way. And it's really individual. So I think that testing and
Mm,
individualized coaching is really kind of where you have to start. And I'll tell you, it doesn't take that much. Once people are aware and understand, oh, I've been thinking about that all wrong. Oh, well, let me try this little thing. Let me try this other thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've had people who've had, they don't trust other people. I said, well, start with your family. And and they're like, I had one guy come back to me and he goes, oh, my daughter loves you. He goes, you've changed my relationship with my family.
Yeah.
And after that, he was able to change his relationships at work, and they weren't so hostile. They were a lot more collaborative, and he listened, and a lot of really good things started to happen.
It's just amazing what happens when you put that mirror up in somebody's face. Right. Now it takes someone who understands how to hold the mirror and how to walk somebody through what they're seeing. Right. Like
Yeah,
there's a lot of flaws that are easy for me to see in myself, but for somebody to be able to show me, hey, sort of the origins behind that, right? And how to deal with it and how to move forward. That's a very, very delicate and like skillful individual that's required to really help somebody grow in that regard. Would you agree with that?
yeah. I mean, I did get training specifically for this, and I have to say I'm really grateful to the wisdom behind this, decades of research. Because often what happens when I get this test and this assessment and I give it to people, and sometimes it can be really tough news for them. They're looking at their numbers and they're like, well, I'm how much below average? Like they're looking at it. And but I ask them what stands out to them, and most of them just say, you know what, this kind of explains my whole life. And if they're really open to it, they see how these scores explain their problems.
Mm,
And then it's in a way there's something practical. So if I just address this one thing, everything is going to get better. And I'm like, well, why don't we try?
right.
And let's just address. So it starts to become really manageable and really specific
Mm-hmm.
and something that they can actually do. I think, if holding up a mirror, but you're not really separating out the parts, it can be overwhelming. But most people, when you say, well, yeah, there's a lot of things we can do. What do you want to do?
Mm,
And they have an intuition about themselves about what they need to do. And it's just really supporting that change that they kind of know inside anyway. They probably can be more empathetic. They probably do need to work on impulse control. They
right.
probably do need to work on their own sense of their own self confidence and,
Right.
and belief in themselves. They have to believe in themselves as much as their organization. Um,
You're making so many great points. Tell us how this is different from like counseling. Because I love both, right? I want to be very, very
right.
clear. I respect a lot of what comes out of the therapy and the counseling world. I'm super grateful for what I've been able to go through in that regard. This is it's turned up, right? It's just like, okay, let's take all of this research, all of this backing, and let's turn it up and let's apply it and let's put that throttle down. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, please. And let's go become that person that you're death, like not that you're death, that you can become. Like let's max out who John Mark Vanderpool could become if we get all of these things right. But please tell me if I'm out of line.
No, you're 100% right. It is about being your best self, John
Mm-hmm.
Mark's best version of himself, of your best version of yourself. Here's the difference between coaching and just really in a nutshell between coaching and say therapy and counseling, which I agree, therapy and counseling
It's
is
great.
really important. And I've had some clients who say, I need a therapist too, because as a coach, basically I say, let's look forward. Who do you want to be?
Mm,
Who do you want to be? And how can we get you there?
right.
And a therapist says, so when did you first start feeling
Right.
uncomfortable about yourself, is lacking confidence in yourself? What did your mother say? And so they look backward
Right.
at how you got here, which is useful. But coaching looks forward. Where do you want to go from here? If you really think of it as, just kind of, you know, that crossroads and where you
Mm,
want to go. taking charge, not just going on the path that you know, but just thinking about taking charge on what is the path you want to be on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that analogy, though. And again, therapy, counseling, wonderful. Like, it's a great thing. But I found myself, I think it's a great, I think any kind of introspection and reflection is a net positive. But you're talking about applying not just to individuals, but to entire teams, right? So like, I always love using like, how are we rowing in the same direction, right? Is everyone rowing the boat in the same direction? It's like, yes, but what if we actually put a motor on the back of that thing and it was a big one and we throttled it down and we were able to go a lot faster, more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Yeah, sometimes whole teams do get misaligned. And it's usually, this kind of comes to our second point here, right?
Right.
Um, the silos, right? Which is something that's really, really common. And often it's more than just really silos, even, it's territorialism. So that
Right.
one part of an organization actually sees the other parts of the organization as competition in some way or as a threat or as taking their resources and trying to take up all the most resources they can,
Mm-hmm.
and they start working against each other. And this really honestly, this is really common in for-profit and nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
spaces. It's you get people, they're good at what they do, a company grows and expands, and pretty soon the people who are good at what they do have built a whole team, and they're just protective of their
Right.
team and what they do. And it's organically kind of the natural way a lot of places grow, unless you're really, really working very hard all the way through that growth process to maintain a sense of like, this is the direction we're rowing in. We are all rowing together. We're all in this together. And when we all do well, you do well too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not taking anything away from you.
Mm-hmm.
We are helping you. And we all have to see each other as helping each other. So
Right.
in the coaching space, what I find is that generally the leaders in the organization are unable to break through that, because if they could have, they would have.
Right.
It really does take some kind of coaching or team facilitation. Um, an offsite is amazing, but I do a
Mm-hmm.
process called, where we write the team charter, and
Mm-hmm.
we just come into a room. And the first thing we do is identify our strengths. What are we good at?
Mm-hmm.
And you end up with, we write them, people interview each other, they write down their partner's strengths, they stick it on sticky notes on the wall, and we end up with this wall of strengths. And like, this is who we are. Um, and then we start talking about, what are we going to do with all of this incredible talent that we have? Well, this is our purpose. We define the purpose of the team, which, it's incredible how many teams don't really know what they are doing.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and their vision, if they do really well, what does it do for the world? What does it do for the organization?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then bringing in some information from stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? Their teammates, for sure. The leaders serve their teammates, they serve their boss. But there's external, right? You've got
Absolutely.
donors, you've got beneficiaries, you've
100%.
got customers, all of that. So there's really a before the day, you really have to work to interview all of those people, do surveys, and know, what do they want from us?
Mm.
Where are we falling short in their eyes? And that really helps focus people on like, okay, where we can do better, right? They know their strengths, they know what people want from them, then they're really ready to buckle down to what we do best,
Mm-hmm.
how we do it best, what are our the key processes, what are our KPI, how do we measure our success, which is so important. As you
Right.
know, it's so important to measure what is the impact you're making. um, and then I end with listing out values, with really developing a list of values, because you can have your strengths, you can have your mission, your vision, your purpose, but sometimes all kinds of things can happen.
Right.
I mean, we are in a world of disruption.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I'm in LA. The fires here are just incredible incredible disruption on all kinds of businesses, as well as personal families. It just radiates outward. We all remember the pandemic. That's not too far in the past. Um, and now we have a lot of political disruption, right? So when everything is disrupted and you don't even think you can do your mission today because of the externals, there's been
Right.
a fire, a pandemic, or whatever, you can rely on your values. How do we want to be in the world?
So good.
And when you have all of this and you put it into a one-page team charter, we know our strengths, we know what our stakeholders want, we know what our mission is, our vision, and our values, and our KPI and what we measure. This is all on one page, and they walk away feeling like I've just seen people just going, I didn't even know we were so good at that, but I think we're
Mm,
really gonna kill it. They're just they discover their own strength, they discover their own inspiration. They do rise up out of the silo,
right.
and that is the whole point of that kind of a day. So it's an incredibly moving experience to watch a team go through this and come out really feeling empowered and cohesive and together and really rowing together. That's the
Absolutely.
engine on the back.
I think that's so well said. I don't have the data to support this, but just from anecdotal experience, I think that silos hold more organizations back than anything else. It's just a hunch. The roadblocks that we've run into by working with organizations are usually because there are these fiefdoms, these departments that are so tightly held and protected, and it prevents a lot of things from breaking through. One thing that we try to do to crack through the silo is use data. Okay, cool. So if we can't get in there, we're going to punch a hole through there and we're going
Right.
to extract data, and that's how we'll collaborate. But I love what you're saying. It's no, let's actually align the people. We're not a change management organization, but what you're talking about is let's align our entire system, structure, and personnel to be able to break down the walls, rather than what a lot of folks have had to do, ourselves included, is no, let's just bust through the wall and collaborate as effectively as we can without becoming change management consultants.
Right. Well, and I think the inspiration part too is just really,
Mm-hmm.
is just really important. And that was one of the things I found with my company way back, right? When I was starting my company, I decided all of my marketing would be 100% positive. In all
Wow,
those years, I never said a bad thing about a plastic bag.
that's amazing, actually.
We have some problems with plastic, and I was happy to talk about the problems with plastic sort of worldwide on a global scale. But mostly I just talked about, you know what, there's a better way.
Wow.
And it's actually more comfortable. And you actually carry more. You can put it on your shoulder, and then you can also take your dog or your baby in at the same time, like so fewer trips from the car. It was just 100% inspirational. There's a better way.
Hmm.
And it's true with silos and teams. It is preventing them from doing better. And when they see, hey, there's a better way,
Mm-hmm.
let's inspire them, not just break down the wall, but just lift them up so that they
Right.
all get over the wall by themselves and feel like they're just above it.
Right.
The inspiration part, I think, is really important, getting them inspired by, and it's them who are inspiring themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really inspiring them, but I am uncovering what's inspiring about this team and what you're doing.
I love that. Absolutely love that. And what you have, this last point is, there's always the workshops, there's the offsites, we get excited, but then it's sort of what's next, right? And a lot of organizations fall flat on what's next. And that's not because of any fault of their own. There's not a lot of follow through, right? Sometimes we, as outsiders, it's easy to do these workshops, 2 day, 3 day, whatever. And then it's okay, thumbs up, go figure it out. And that can be devastating. What I'm seeing that you provide, and this is something that we're very big on as well, is just the continuity of care, to use that phrase. You talk about leading through people using one-on-ones and other types of management and leadership development. I think this is something that we could probably talk about all day long. But what do you see, before we dive into how to conduct a one-on-one, what do you see as sort of those missing opportunities with management training and leadership training?
Well, let me just start with the CEOs and at the top, what I see. I see that a lot of CEOs or executive directors get very transactional. They're trying to hit KPIs, they're trying to get fundraising, they're trying to, and they get so bogged down into what they're doing, they forget, really what is, really keeping a larger view of what's happening in their workplace, right? And so I focus CEOs generally really quickly in our conversations about what's the culture that you're building in your organization. And a lot of them don't even know how to answer that question when I first talk about it. Um, so we start, breaking it down. Well, what are people rewarded for? What goes wrong and how is it handled? Um, I've had CEOs come to me and say, but they make so many errors. Why are they making so many errors? And I'm like, why are they? you know, that is the question. And usually it's a culture where being careful isn't really valued. And why isn't that? What are they worried about if they're not worried about their work? Um, it really is a culture uh, piece that is often missing from even really successful places. I mean, I've worked with pretty big companies, when, companies making, 5 billion a year,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know what their culture is. I'm like, okay, well, you're not going to, you want to get to 10 billion, but you're probably not going to get there if you don't understand your own culture and make
Right.
sure it's the kind of culture that's going to support how you want to grow. So,
Yeah.
that's where I start with CEOs. And then when we get deeper into the organization, um, managing people day to day, I would just get into one on ones right away. There's emotional intelligence assessments and coaching, really useful in that area too. But also just learning how to do one on ones right has been the single most productive thing that most of the managers I work with can do to increase their impact everywhere. It
Mm.
is the most productive hour of their week, but you have to be intentional about it,
Right.
right? You can't just go in, wing some kind of conversation, and then think, oh, I just did it. It doesn't happen by magic. You have to be
Right.
really intentional about how you do it.
Let's just break it down, Lisa, because this is such a gift. I mean, I've got an MBA. No one teaches, how to manage through one-on-ones. I don't remember that class. I took those classes pretty seriously. It didn't exist. And it's just like, wow, how do you lead through people? What does that look like? Right? It's not just some inspiring speech in the beginning of the week and say, knock them dead. It's more than that. And so let's talk about breaking down the right way to do one-on-ones.
Okay. Well, we've got, a little time limit here, I'm going to say, and I'm going to just go over three of my top tips for how to break this down and to, have your one on ones really make an impact and become productive. A lot of people think the pushback that I get on one on ones is they say, well, my door is always open. It's just going to take up too much time. But what every single client I know who has implemented one on ones finds that they actually have more time, because the interruptions are less, because they're taking care of all of the needs of their people in 1 hour in a week. And so they can schedule that time, and then they can schedule blocks of time where they need to actually do other things that they need to do to be productive. So it actually makes them more productive. Every single person that I've worked with says, yeah, actually, I do get more time after they implement it. So that's a real surprise for a lot of people. But the first tip that I give people is you have to have regular one-on-ones every week or every other week. It kind of depends on the pace. No more than every other, not longer than every other week. 60 minutes is a minimum, because otherwise they don't have a chance to get into the things that are really bothering them. You don't want them rushed. And the direct report makes the agenda and leads the meeting. So first of all, this frees up the leader. The leader is not sitting there making agendas for like 8 people all week. Each one of them, they know what they're working on. they know the progress they've made. That's what this meeting is about. Come in, give me a progress update on all your projects, and let's ask, on each project, what could go wrong? What are the obstacles you're encountering? Let's figure those out. And then what are you going to commit to? What are you going to really work on this week? So they just come in with that agenda. I really encourage people to come in with 2 paper agendas and turn off all your devices. Close your laptop, put the keyboard away. Let's just talk person to person. This is a time to connect. So that's just one. It's just some, basic admin stuff. Who's running the team and who's making the agenda. 2, my second tip, that might have seemed like a few tips, but I'm rolling them into one. My second tip is to highlight that the manager's job is to listen. And listening to your direct report is a powerful act. If you do nothing but listen, they are going to walk out of there saying, wow, my boss cares about me, and I better really work hard to keep this great job. And just listening is an act of caring and building credibility and trust. There's a few other things you might want to listen for, particularly every once in a while. It's not very often. You're going to find an obstacle that they're encountering that is too big for them to overcome, and they might fail. And if you are a manager and you define your success as their success, your success is tied with theirs. You don't want to fail. You don't want them to fail. So sometimes if it's too big for them to fail, you need to step in and you need to find a way to help them through and take some strategic action. We were talking earlier, and I'll just bring this up again. I have a new article out on Forbes today about challenge stress and challenge stress and threat stress. And one of the things we know is that people are happiest when they're challenged, but they're unhappy if they're threatened. And so the difference between challenge stress and threat stress is just degree. It's all stress. It's all the same kind of stress. But it turns out that if you have much more than a 50-50 chance of failure, like if you're going to fail maybe 2 out of 3 times, people are so stressed they can't even function and they will stop trying. But it turns out that if it's too easy, if 2 out of 3 times they're going to succeed, they start playing games on the side. They start doing other things, acting out, whatever it is. They're not being productive because they're just not engaged. But somewhere right around that 50-50, you have to have that 50-50 chance of failure or success. And it just keeps you sharp enough to really say, oh, I have to actually try on this. Let me put some energy into what I'm doing because I don't want to fail. So in the one-on-one, one of the things you're looking for is, where's their stress level? Are they too comfortable? Are they too threatened? Or are they right in that challenge zone where I want them? So you're listening for these things week by week. And we know things change week by week.
There's so much to break down with this, Lisa. You're sharing so many good insights. Do you have a few minutes to go into number 3 here? Because I want to talk about just those first 2 points. You've made this so much more attainable for managers, so much easier for leaders. Because just the stress of the manager, the added thing, I need to prepare an agenda. I need to be ready to talk to them about their problems. That's out of the conversation. The direct reports are preparing the agenda, and your job is to listen. Thank heavens, right? That is such a relief, right?
That is your job. Listen, be empathetic. Just say, oh, yeah. Oh, well, that's great. Or, oh, okay, that sucks. Whatever. It's like, okay, just be human and listen to their problems. Right. And that does lead me to my third one. So shall we jump into it a little bit?
Please.
All right. Don't solve their problems.
Right.
So that's also off your
plate. Thank you, Lisa.
Right? Like, You don't have to, they're going to come in with their problems. Your job is not to solve them, but your job is to teach them how to go through a problem solving process and to let them know that you believe in them to solve their own problems. That's empowering, right? Solving their problem is micromanaging. It robs them of their power.
Right.
But when you lead them through problem solving and help them understand, okay, what is the goal? Refocus. So problem solving process is 3 simple questions. 1, what is the goal? Because people forget what they're trying to do when they come up against an obstacle. So refocus on the overall goal. And then 2, what are your options for action? And make them come up with it. What? Well, so, all right, there's the, here's the goal, here's the problem. What are your options? And let them come up with it. If they don't come up with something that you really think is obvious and they should, you can suggest one. You can say, well, yeah, you might also think about this. But you don't have to. Get them through that. And then you say, all right, so what is the obstacle? What could get in the way here? And they think about, well, I don't know. I don't really have time for this. Or I think, so-and-so in the other silo is in the way, or whatever, those things that are really in the way. That's when you're getting into a real conversation about, okay, and now how are you going to deal with that person? How have you supported them? Do you only call them when you want something from them? Do you ever call them and say, hey, I have a half an hour. I'd be happy to help you on something. I'm happy to pitch in on your, envelope folding or whatever you're doing, and what do you give them?
Right.
And thinking about, what is in the way and thinking about, okay, how I can take some steps to solve it, right? What you don't want is for them to go out, take some action, hit a roadblock and say, okay, it's too hard, I'm out. No, give them some strategies so that when you see them the next week or 2 weeks later, you're like, all right, how did it go?
Right.
And you're just keeping tabs on them. It was hard, but you overcame it. And look, sometimes if you do have a 50-50 chance of failure, sometimes you're not going to succeed. And I would just say not succeed the first time. You're going to try something, it doesn't go well, you didn't get as far as you want, but that's okay. Roll it over, do it again. There's this really incredible TED Talk by John Doerr, Doerr.
Oh, yeah, he's a stud. Yeah, love John Doerr.
He's incredible.
Measure What Matters, Stanford investor, great guy. Yeah.
This is exactly from Measure What Matters, right? Yeah. So somebody, had the project of designing a Google browser. And I don't really remember exactly the numbers, but I think the first year they wanted something like 10 million users. He said users are going to define whether it's a good browser or not. So just his only KPI was the number of users. And I think he wanted 10 million users the first year, and he got like 8 or something, and it just wasn't good. But instead of pulling back, he doubled down. So his next year, he said, well, I want 50 million users. And he really upped the ante. And he didn't make it the next year, but he got something like 38 million or 40 million. It was a pretty good jump. It was a 4x growth, but it wasn't his goal. He was looking at 5x. And so he doubled down again. He said, the next year I want 100 million users.
Gracious.
And he blew it out of the water. He got 130 million users.
My goodness.
Right. But at that point, he had convinced the whole company. They gave him the resources. They gave him the team. They gave him the servers. And they gave him what he needed to be really successful, and they blew it out of the water. So just because you don't make it doesn't mean you failed. Keep going. Double down. Keep challenging yourself and keep moving the goalpost, and you'll get there. People want that chance to try again.
I love
That's
this.
what they really want.
So this is such a helpful, but it's such an easier approach, right? It's a lot easier than saying, I've got 16 one-on-ones this week. I need to prepare 16 agendas. and I need to solve 16 times whatever many problems, right? But it's also, this is sort of like a little Jedi jujitsu kind of a thing, like work less, but have a much greater outcome, right? A lot
A little
easier.
Jedi mind trick, yeah.
Right. But it also raises the quality, raises the work standard because your team's coming with problems and solutions and you're guiding them through the process rather than, hey, I need X, Y, and Z. Okay, let's bang this out real quick and make it happen so you can get back to doing that.
Right. And what happens is they learn.
Right.
So the quality of problems that starts coming next year are really different, right?
Mm,
They have the same problems that they had last year, but they're not talking to you about it because they know how to handle it. They've learned, right? And this is how growth happens. This is why and you're going one on one. Just taking the time to spend one on one time with somebody, honestly, by itself, um, you learn a lot because there's so much they won't say in a group.
right.
There is
Right.
so much, right? And I've got so many other tips that really help, just really practical, just exactly like this, that make your life easier and help you really, you know, take your team to the next level, without spending more of your time. Actually, you'll have more of your time left if you
Mm,
do it right.
hmm.
Um, so yeah, I want to get all these tips out. I'm really dedicating 2025 to helping other people. Um, do better one-on-ones and have more productive one-on-ones. So I have an article on LinkedIn out now with
Perfect.
8 tips. These are 3 tips, arguably maybe 5 tips. I think I squeezed a couple in to that first one. Um, but there's an article I've got out right now on LinkedIn about 8 tips, and I want to start working on some free webinars that I'm going to announce pretty soon about some uh, some free webinars where I'm going to give you, the whole thing. You're going to get all 12, and
So
it's actually a baker's dozen. There's 13 tips that are all really practical, just like this, that will help your team grow, make it easier for you, and make you more productive, the
this is
most
so great.
productive time in your week.
I mean, what a gift! And you don't have to do this, right? You started and sold a company. Like this is something that you're choosing to spend your time doing. And what a tremendous gift! And that's what I love about your perspective. Is this isn't you went to a workshop and got a training and you're leveraging all of that. That's fine. There's a place for that. But this is coming from you had hundreds of employees, right? You had people all over the world that were working for you. You were managing a global team as you grew, and you did it by leading with empathy. Right? That's tremendous.
Empathy and ethics, and yeah, it just, I found that, like, a lot of people think, well, no, if you really have to worry about every single person, you're just going to get bogged down. I'm like, no, you get lifted up.
Mm.
All those people will lift you up, you know.
You remind me, I had a track coach in high school. He had the most state championships of any high school track coach in the state of Tennessee. And it's this very kind, soft spoken savage. I mean, the guy was an absolute, like, he was the most high school championships of anybody out there. And he would just talk to you in this kind, empathic voice. And he would, hey, let's talk about, I did the decathlon. He's like, hey, let's talk about what you want to do for long jump this year. And I was like, oh, I think I can get whatever. And he's like, I feel like you could probably get a little bit more than that. I'm like, really? You think so? It's like, yeah, I've seen you jump, kid. I think you could push it a little bit more. Or then, you have to run laps at the end of practice and you're like, what do you think you're going to do on this last 400? It's like, I don't know, coach. I think I'm going to get like a 51, 52. He's like, I think you got a little more in the tank, bud. Go show me. And you're trashed and exhausted, but all you can hear is this encouraging voice. I'm going to do it for Coach Harper. That was his name, Charlie Harper. He's like, I'm going to run my tail off to make sure that I meet this goal that this guy who believes in me is setting. Now, I've had other experiences that were a lot less, encouraging and exciting. So
We all
seeing that
have.
contrast is great. But I love that approach. And I feel like you embody that in a very professional but very profound way.
I mean, it really is about helping. The key phrase, John Mark, as I'm listening to you, is like, I'm going to try to do this for this guy who believes in me,
Right. Right.
right? He believed in you, and that helped you believe in yourself. And then you found reserves of energy and potential and growth that you didn't even know you had,
Exactly.
right? But when you believe, you can.
Right.
And it's just incredible what happens when, and you see this, you listen to, you know, these team champions, and when you see a team winning a championship, and they get up to the microphone, the first thing they say invariably is like, I love my team. I just
Right.
love my team, right? All that love, they all believe in each other, they support each other, they bring each other up. Those are the champions every single time. I love my team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And honestly, you can't get to the championship unless you've got to start with love.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to start with believing in yourself and believing in others and lifting everybody up. And that is the kind of thing that makes real people grow and champions, really champions.
That happens in one-on-ones, right? That doesn't happen in team meetings. And I think that's what's so important. That's such a distinction, because I hear people say, oh, you need to do 15-minute one-on-ones every other week. You're like, 15 minutes? When is that? When are you going to get anywhere in 15 minutes, right? How are you going to get to know somebody in 15 minutes, especially with like a remote team, right? That's wild. So
Yeah.
just the way you're approaching it's less work for the leadership, but it's more engagement, more empathy, and more connection and better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
It is the most powerful single thing you can do for no money. You don't need any money to do this.
Right.
And it will save you time. You don't believe me now, but it will.
Oh, I believe you.
No.
I believe you right now, because I'm looking at my schedule thinking, wow, this would look very different if we did this a better way. Lisa, thank you so much for your time. I think we need to do many more of these if you're open for it, because there was so much to unpack. But thank you for making this happen. Really appreciate you sharing all of this with us.
Thank you so much for the time.
Now, the
Thanks so
main
much
thing
for
that people
having
need to
me.
understand is lisadfostercoach.com is the place to go to learn more about all of the resources that Lisa has. You obviously have contact forms built out where people can schedule times directly with you. You have an excellent quiz that you'll find on the homepage about how well you and your team are using EQ, empathetic quotient, empathy, and authority leading in that way. But is there anything else where people can follow you? Obviously, you got articles on LinkedIn, articles, not what am I trying to say? Not Schwab, but
Forbes.
Forbes. Thank you. On Forbes, you have wonderful resources available for individuals.
Yeah, just reach out to me. I'm just saying, if you're thinking, maybe you have some of these problems, the mission problem, or silos, or management within your culture, or management in your organization, let's just talk. Like, just reach out, talk to me. I'm just a human being. I'll listen and see where you are. If I can help, I will definitely help. And if I
Mm,
can't, then great. Okay, what have you lost? Nothing. So reach out to me anywhere, LinkedIn or my website, and I'm here to help.
perfect. We'll have all of the links in the show notes of the podcast, and obviously share this anywhere else as possible, especially on LinkedIn. But again, thank you so much for your time, Lisa. This has been fantastic.
All right. Thank you, John Mark. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.